There they are, right there, right there.
Since I started photographing 399, it's been 15 years.
Grizzly Bear 399, she's known as the matriarch or the queen.
But her fame makes everything more complicated.
Bears that get close to people lose their normal fear response.
There's just so many things that can go wrong.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Fred Kaufman, executive producer of Nature. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for a very special Q&A for our episode, Grizzly 399, Queen of the Tetons. Now, we hope you had a chance to watch the episode. If you didn't, but are interested in 399, you're in the right place. Please submit your questions to the chat, and we'll try to get to them. Please feel free to do that now. If you'd like to see more from the episode, including some behind-the-scenes videos, please subscribe to our Nature newsletter. Links to subscribe are in the chat and the QR code on the screen. Now, let me introduce you to our panel, which we're excited about. Joining me tonight is the director and producer of the film, Elizabeth Leiter, featured biologist Trevor Bloom, and renowned photographer and 399 expert, Tom Mangelsen. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is going to be exciting. This is the first one we've ever done, so bear with us. We're all excited. We're all new to this. Tom, let me start with you. 399 is out of hibernation, and you've seen her.
I have, and you never know if they make it, especially a bear that's that old, if they make it through hibernation. But she came out in good form. Her cub is quite large. The cub didn't have, being a single cub, she didn't have to, or he didn't. We don't know what sex it is, but we call it Spirit. And Spirit didn't have to share any milk or feeds from her mother through the den cycle. So she got doubly big, I think. But I just heard she was up by the Oxbow Bend about 10 minutes ago. So she's out and about, mostly digging ground squirrels and voles and mice and grazing on fresh grass. So she's in good shape.
Now, Tom, are there still the bear jams going on? Is everybody out there looking for her?
Yeah, they are. They're in force. It's a big deal, of course. You know, a lot of people are looking for her, and a lot of people are excited. We're excited last week when she came out. And she's been very sort of distant. She's been in a place called it's Overlook, Blacktail Ponds Overlook. She's been about 600 yards out for about 10 days. And today is the first day she left there. So, of course, I just heard a few minutes ago that she was pretty close to the road. So for over a week, she's been 600 yards, and I haven't got really a good picture. But
and for you and Trevor, the idea of these bear jams, from the show, clearly she's used to these getting close to people, and for her, it's a place of safety. But of course, you always see people sort of maneuvering and jockeying for position, and there can be some. It can be dangerous. Trevor, I'm curious about your feelings about that.
Yeah, I think the Grand Teton National Park does a really great job managing the bear jams, and in over a decade of working as a wildlife guide up there as well, I've never really seen too terrible of interactions happening at the bear jam. But really, you almost feel bad for the bears. Sometimes they're trying to cross the road, and there's a line of 100 people, and they can't cross the road, or they get startled. But it's actually been pretty surprising and amazing that you've never seen like a negative, like a mauling or anything like that happening at these bear jams, and it could be a matter of time, but for the most part, it's also really amazing to just see that many people caring about wildlife tourism and coming to an area like Grand Teton National Park to see these bears in a natural habitat. There's very few places in the world you can do that.
Well, I'm noticing there's a lot of comments and questions in the chat, so let me get right to those. From Joyce, does 399 always hibernate in the same place?
Well, maybe you'll answer that. I learned about 16 years ago, and she had been collared with a radio collar, and from a friend of mine, Chris Flaherty, who was a North District Ranger in Teton Park, and he was particularly fond of 399 from the get-go. He told me where she hibernated because they tracked her with the radio collar, and then she would always pretty much go up Pilgrim Creek and go into that wilderness area. And a few years later, she traveled about 40 or 50 miles in 1 or 2 days in late December in deep snow with 3 2-year-old cubs. And I was curious just where she might go. So I hired a pilot with a fixed wing pilot from the airport here and just followed the tracks into an area in the wilderness where they disappeared into the forest. And that's where I figured where her den was. And I went back a couple of years later, and pretty high elevation, of course. And she was sitting on a south-facing slope where the snow had melted, and she was nursing 3 cubs. So that was pretty cool. And she's been, I think, using that den most often. But they do den usually in the same area, but maybe not the same den. But this one was a big hole under a huge Douglas fir tree. So it was an earthen den, and probably like the 4 seasons compared to some dens that bears make.
I saw a question in the chat, and something I've always been curious about watching the film. Does she interact? Is there any kind of recognition with her other offspring, her other cubs that have matured?
Yes, she's a number of times we've seen them at some close distance, maybe 100 or 200 yards, and each of them will stand up to figure out if that's somebody we know or if that's dangerous bear or whatever. And what they sort of circle, and I realize that they circle around to catch the wind and catch the scent. They can't really, bears see just fine, pretty much just like us. It's kind of a misinterpretation that they can't see very well, but they can see fine. But their smell is obviously much better. And so they get downwind of their family member, and then they'll go get together, usually kind of casual. And if it's over a carcass, they'll share, like there was a bison carcass a number of years ago that they shared. But they took turns, but it's sort of like a little bit of a scramble. They didn't all 8 or 7 or whatever it was at the time eat together, but they would take turns. So that was really cool to see. They definitely recognize each other once they got the scent.
Trevor, from Vanessa asks, what's the lifespan of a grizzly?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the wild, it seems like, this 20 to 25 years is pretty old for a bear. Bears in captivity can live well over 30, 35 years. But, grizzly bear 399 being 28 this year, and continuing to raise a cub, that makes her the oldest known female with cubs that's been recorded, at least in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And also to build on Tom's comment too, there's another grizzly bear in the area, grizzly bear 610, which is one of 399's offspring, that often has cubs. And it's pretty common to see them both in the same day, not far away from each other. And there's special moments when you actually see the families come together.
Boy, we're getting so many questions and comments. Elizabeth, I want to get to you. I had a question, and I saw it in the comments as well. What surprised you about making the film? Maybe something that was unexpected?
Well, thank you, everybody who's here and watching. And I learned so much from Tom and from Trevor and from so many other people that contributed to the film, both on screen and through research and behind the scenes. I was really, in the beginning, kind of excited and interested in this idea that 399 was a celebrity bear, and what does it mean for a wild animal to be a celebrity and to be known, and to have such a big, sort of online presence. And as I kind of kept digging deeper into her story and her life, and talking to lots of different folks in Jackson and people who know this kind of ecosystem well, I became really, really surprised by how much I knew that I would learn about grizzlies, but I had no clue how much she sort of serves as a mirror to humans about our own perspectives and what we believe to be sort of, our desired relationship with nature, or the way that we interact with nature or with each other. So I think that she really is sort of like a prism for us to not only learn about her species, but a lot about what's happening internally for us.
From John and Sandy, how many of 399's offspring are still alive and well?
Well, I think most people, it's really hard to know because they distribute pretty far and wide, especially the males. And I think most people's guess is about half, maybe less than half have survived. And most of those have been due to human activity of one kind or another, getting run over by a car, getting shot, getting poached, getting in maybe a cow or something and getting euthanized. But I think so. What do you think, Trevor?
Yeah, I think half's probably generous, but I think that's pretty good. I think they also say that she has the most offspring that we know of, and then now grandchildren of any bear in the GYE. But it's hard to put a hard number on it, and not every bear is tracked throughout its life the way that she is.
I think the general consensus is that she's probably had somewhere between 28 and 36 offspring, and that's a lot of bears. But if you think it's been less than 50% that survived in over the last 18 years or so, it's not. Go ahead. Yeah.
Tom and Trevor, and isn't it that grizzlies are the slowest reproducing land mammal in North America, or something like that?
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah. So they provide, essentially 2.5 years of parental care. Most mammals provide more like 1 year parental care. So pretty much the slowest reproducing land mammal besides us humans in North America. But they were good parents.
I want to ask about delisting, and I know that's obviously a huge topic and a big controversy. But first, I want to remind everybody on this chat that we have more behind-the-scenes content in our nature newsletter. So please use the QR code that you see in the chat to subscribe. What is the status of grizzlies in the surrounding states on delisting the bear?
Go ahead, Trevor.
Well, as far as I know right now, it's not really actively moving forward with them delisting them. They have been proposed to be delisted several years ago. They were effectively delisted, and then there was a large campaign and a large pushback from folks that sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and actually that was reversed. And now it's been several years since that, and you always hear murmurings that they're on the cusp of being delisted. The main thing is that the Fish and Wildlife Service, when they listed the grizzlies, they've set a recovery number of between about 700 to 800 animals in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And a lot of the conservative population estimates now say that there's well over 1,000. So they've reached that threshold. So you keep hearing murmurings that it's going to happen. But there is a lot of, pushback from the public and a lot of pushback from scientists that say until we see, gene flow between two populations and until we really get a handle on the effects of climate change, that they shouldn't be delisted. So there's nothing really imminent right now, but I do think that there's always, it's always being considered that they will be delisted.
I think that there's actually not as much noise as there was a few years ago, because they keep getting kind of burned, so to speak. But the politicians in all three states, from the governor, the legislatures, the commissioners, the game departments, I think they're all rapidly hoping and pushing for delisting. And I don't think we've seen so much of it, Trevor, maybe as we used to, because they used to announce it or be more outward about it. But I think it's more, they're doing more in the background. I really think too that 399's sort of stardom has something to do with that. But it's I think it's pretty eminent that they're going to continue to push the Fish and Wildlife Service to delist the states, that is. Yeah.
Is there any sharing of grizzly bears? Does the any federal agency move them around to help troubling populations anywhere else in other states?
Not that I'm aware of. Are you, Trevor? They want to
Well,
increase
yes.
Yeah.
I think it just got approved where they are going to do a reintroduction of grizzly bears to North Cascades National Park in Washington. And that would be really the first of its kind for grizzly bears. They do that with other animals, reintroductions, or, bringing in animals from outside populations to kind of increase the gene flow. It's really hard, I think, especially with bears that have such a affinity to their home range, to try to bring them in from other locations. We do have problem bears that get moved from, a higher, an area of higher population where they're interacting with people, and they try to move them into the wilderness, away from people. And sometimes they just walk right back to their home range. But one exciting thing is they are really moving forward with the reintroduction of grizzly bears into the North Cascades of Washington, where there is an adjacent population of grizzly bears in British Columbia. So that'll be really interesting to see if that actually comes to fruition. It's supposed to, which would be the first of its kind for a grizzly bear reintroduction that I know of.
We all see some troubling videos, usually on YouTube, when people are getting too close to wildlife. And so what are your suggestions and tips for watching bears safely and in general observing wildlife safely?
Well, most people know that, that we now have bear spray. You don't need to carry guns into the park or guns into the wilderness. Bear spray is much more effective. And just being aware when you're hiking, usually hiking with, a friend or two or three friends, and making noise, and be sure you're not if you are aware of the bear and its cubs, and give it space and back up, move away. There's a lot of just being aware in the wilderness. That goes with all wildlife in general. They need space. 399 has chosen, as you've seen in the film, to accept people in her habitat, in her range. And she, there's a question about whether we should just leave her alone, but I don't know if anybody in the audience would probably, if they saw a 399 with 4 cubs along the highway, wouldn't stop and try to take a picture, whether with an iPhone or, professional camera. But it's in our nature because they're so rare and nobody hardly ever sees them. And she has been such a great bear, and she chooses where to cross the highway. I've seen her with, when there's a big crowd of a big bear jam, and she will just avoid the bear jam, just go down a half a mile, and you see her crossing the highway, and we all say, "Oh, she's way down." So she's all the way down there, and so she's so intelligent, and I think she just accepts that people are okay, and she's just a rare bear, of course.
Tom, you made a statement in the film that I repeat to people over and over again because I simply can't believe it, that you've taken about 100 million photographs of 399 and have between 5 and 10 good ones, which kind of sounds like my batting average. But what goes in? I'm sure there are a number of amateur photographers on this chat, or and who better than you to give us some tips about how to take, where to stand, what to look for, and for you, what makes it a good photograph?
Well, I think like traditional art, painting and sculpture, and you need composition, all the right stuff, light, the backgrounds. But with the bears, it's a lot about their behavior, and I think my goal is to capture a bear in the landscape, sort of like the one that we saw in film, called First Light, where 399 is crossing the river in the background. It has Mount Moran at, really first light in the morning when the sun is kissing the top of Mount Moran. And the gesture is really important. She has her left leg out. I mean, I shot maybe 40 frames of her crossing the river, but her legs are kind of back too far. It looks like she's going to tip over. That's the same way with any animal like horses, or, you want to get the gesture right. And of course, the light and the mood, and it's just a lot of stuff that really has to come together. I mean, it's not difficult to shoot a portrait or a bear walking by, but it's, pretty boring. And so the one that's called The Guardian, with her standing up with all, 4 cubs kind of around her, it's really nice light. She's standing, which is really beautiful. And the 4 cubs are being like kids, goofing around with each other, playing. So that activity and that behavior is rare to get it all together. So, and then the one with called Among the Sages, when they just came out of the den, or we first saw them, the time they leave the den and time that maybe she comes down the highway could be a couple of weeks. But they're really tiny and they're all curious. A couple of them are standing up, and there's just a beautiful sage foreground, beautiful mint green, and they're all attentive and in a really nice composition. So it's hard to get all that in one frame.
Do you know you have it when you take the shot?
I did on those ones, yes. A lot of others, I'm not sure, but yeah.
And Trevor, you're a bit of a photographer too.
Yeah, I love shooting video and shooting photos.
And do you have a collection of 399 photographs? Yeah,
definitely. Some of those moments that Tom definitely got better images of, I have that same picture, of 399 with all 4 cubs in the snow. That was December 30th a couple years ago. I mean, I was there that day. And so I definitely have a collection and love to continue to photograph her and other grizzly bears and other wildlife.
Elizabeth, there's so much passion and emotion associated with this bear, and very often with wildlife in general. But certainly with 399, I mean, we see it in the film you produced and did. And when you're there as a journalist and as a producer, I'm sure you're feeling it. But what's going through your mind as you're observing all these people and their strong emotion toward this animal?
I was really moved myself by people's reactions to 399 before I ever even saw 399. And one thing that really stuck with me is that for many people, having this experience with a wild bear or a bear in the wild and somewhere as beautiful as Grand Teton National Park is so moving. Some people would even call it spiritual, and it's kind of defies words for them. And so I felt like, oh, that's something really, really profound and important to capture. And I've spoken with Tom and Trevor and many other people about this idea too. And even us, Fred, we've spoken about this when we first started talking about this project, is that connection with nature that people can feel when they're in such a beautiful place is so crucial and important. And as Angus Thurmer said to me once, also rare now, So I wanted to capture that. I also wanted to be very, very cautious not to anthropomorphize 399 or her kind, because it can be really easy for us to project our human emotions onto her. And so it's really important to kind of understand what's their behavior and what is she doing that's unique or kind of typical, but also wanting to really highlight her beauty and strength as a way to explore how profound her life has been on all these humans around her over so many years. And Tom's photos capture it beautifully. And people, when they see her, I mean, I've never seen really anything quite like that in my life. I've heard people just burst into tears, melt down. I know Tom and Trevor have seen it as well. So it was an honor to be able to capture that on film and to try to share what it's like being near her in nature in video. It's never quite the same as being there in person, but we really wanted to get close to that essence.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon, but there's a great comment here from Kai. Can you tell 399 Happy Mother's Day from me? Tom, we'll rely on you to do that. Tom, do you think she'll be safe through the spring and summer and fall?
Well, it depends on a lot of things, of course. Her biggest danger is probably the highway and traffic and speed. Trevor mentioned 610 is her daughter. She's the oldest living cub that she had, and she's about 16 now, I think. And she had 3 yearlings last year that crossed the highway in October, early October, and I got word that she had been hit by a vehicle. Obviously, there were some big skid marks with four tires, would indicate probably a truck, semi, and she was laying up in the sagebrush about 20 yards off the highway. And we all thought, we went up there, and I thought she was not going to make it because she barely moved her head. She stood up, laid down. She'd been in the same position for about 5 hours almost. And her cubs went out on the highway at one point. And, they stayed with mom for quite a while, but then of course, they got bored and they started looking around. So they went out on the highway, and it was a curve, just in the curve around the corner, and they could have been killed. There was a couple of wildlife brigaders there, but they didn't really have enough protection, I don't think, under the circumstances. But that is really, we had a sign, actually, the Cougar Fund, which I co-founded a number of years ago. We bought a sign, one of those big flashing signs on a trailer that said, just go slow, 1 bear, 2 elk, 2 moose, or whatever, were hit last month. And it was only about 100 yards from her, but it was on the opposite side of where she probably got hit, and there wasn't a sign there. But I think just people really need to be careful. She's really 399 herself is tough, but 610 survived. She's fine now, and she's actually near Pilgrim Creek today, which is the first time we've heard of her being that far north. So she's in 399's normal home range, and which is interesting. And she may have kicked her cubs out. People said that 610 was seen without her cubs. So it's that time. They were 2.5 years old, and they kicked them out, and they have to be on their own now. And but it's really like Russian roulette, like I mentioned in the film, for her crossing the highway. And I think that's the biggest danger for her right now. And
Tom, I know you came out with a book on 399. The film is finished, but are you still as passionate as ever? Are you still out there taking more photographs? Has it, calmed down for you, or are you still doing what you've always been doing with her?
I'm still doing as much as I've ever done with her, except this year, like I say, she's been like 10 days in one place, way off the road down the river bottom, which is actually great for her. I don't mind if she just stayed there all summer, to be honest, because there's no real threats down there. There's no highway to cross, but it's no place, nowhere. I don't go, trashing through the woods or the sagebrush, trying to get closer. I just leave her be. But there are people who have, try to approach her and, get too close maybe, and the rangers or whoever, pulled them back. But but now that she's in a different place, I'll go out in the morning, and 610's been out again, and pretty much go out whenever they're around. But and there's other bears that should have cubs this year. One called Blondie that's ready to have cubs, and one called Bonita, which should have cubs. So it's just gearing up now for more.
Trevor, what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so I still run a wildlife guide company, Guides of Jackson Hole, where we take people out to see wildlife and see grizzly bears. And then I recently actually got a new job working for the Forest Service as well, as the forest botanist, because I have a lot of experience with wildlife, but also what these animals eat, and habitat is really key. And I think that's something we often forget about, that these animals also need forests and landscapes and the native plants that are all being affected by climate change. So I'm staying busy. Also working on my PhD, and I'm also getting married this summer. So it's a big year for me, but I'm still trying to find time to get out there and look for grizzly bears.
Well, congratulations on that. And Elizabeth, what's your next project?
I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm sure we'll be in touch, Fred. I know I've tried to pitch you on rats many times. Urban wildlife exists too, and but who knows where the wind blows next, but it's been an honor and a joy and a privilege to work on this film with all of you and to bring 399's story to the people. And what a joy.
Well, we're going to wrap up. Thank you all, Trevor, Elizabeth, Tom. I've had a great time. This is sort of an experiment for us, but so good to hear from people in the film, giving more context to the story. And I can't see who's out there joining us, but I know there are a bunch of people out there really engaged and passionate. And I saw such great complimentary, kind words. Thank you so much. I just want to conclude with, by the way, that QR code, please note it on the screen. Become a part of our nature community. Learn more about 399 and get our nature newsletter and hear about more upcoming shows. In fact, we have a very different but really relevant, poignant film coming next week. Where we're going to do the same thing. It's called Saving the Animals of Ukraine. And it's portraits of these incredibly courageous, dedicated people who are, going out of their way to rescue and save many of the pets that have been left behind, zoo animals, caring for them. Their stories are incredible. It's riveting and quite inspiring. So same time next week, Saving the Animals of Ukraine. And here's a clip to show you what that's about. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Have a good night.
And thanks for all the audience. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
The entire world is seeing the depth of animal suffering.
People understand what's going on. Animals, they don't understand.
The Ukraine war has really been an eye-opener to many of us as to the complexities of our obligations to animals in wartime.
No one's going to be left behind, including their pets.